Well, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you all. It's a great honor to be here. Thank you for having me. Thank the founders of CNU, the members of CNU, what you've helped transform our country. In every city and hamlet, your principles and ethics abound, and it's such an honor to be with all of you and to thank you. Thank you for my city, and thank you for America. I thank you, Carol, for your very warm and kind introduction, and for your friendship, and for your message. It is affirmative action that is required by our country. Our nation has quit producing affordable housing, and that's what we've got to just back at it, get back in the job of a national government, state and local governments investing in affordable housing. Try to do the numbers. A worker at a fast food a restaurant cannot afford a home, a decent home, a decent apartment. And that's the answer to gentrification, to keep producing more affordable housing as places get restored so that you have the benefit. People are happier, life is better, our civilization is better when people of all incomes and all backgrounds and all colors and all experiences share and own the same place. So, Carol, right on to you. And Mayor Duggan, in his absence now, I know what job of mayor you got to keep moving, but it's so wonderful that he warmly accepted this important and challenging job of leading one of America's great cities. And thank you, Doug and Lynn, and thank all of you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm going to use Charleston to talk about the principles of building beautiful and livable cities. Charleston is an old American city. It was built before the elevator and the automobile, and I think this was built before either, this device here, but we'll get it working. A city of a wonderful human scale, a city that the Civil War didn't totally destroy, nor did the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution didn't occur in Charleston for the most part. And so you had this extraordinarily beautiful city in the 20s when some energy of economic growth was beginning to occur. The city leaders had the sense to begin our nation's first preservation movement and to keep intact not only the beauty, but the remarkable scale of the city. But Charleston is nothing is preordained, nothing is assured, and nothing doesn't run the risk of mistakes. This was a mistake. This was a demolition of the historic Charleston Hotel where the Democratic Convention of 1860 met. But it was demolished because the city leaders knew to be a great city, you had to have a drive-in motel. There wasn't a great city in America without a drive-in motel. So in this business of city building, our first goal is to not make stupid mistakes. We started working in the rebuilding of our city when I started in 1975. And the city had lost population and crime rate was high and all that. And we started working in the poor sections of our city because a great city needs first to be a just city. We started working in the poor sections of our city, and we wanted to build handsome, affordable housing. Now, this is what they built in the 60s, and it shows you that they really didn't care. It was obligatory. It's ugly as the dickens, and usually they would put a cyclone fence around it so you would know that the area was unsafe and nobody should really want to live there to begin with. So we were determined to build attractive, affordable housing. And this is what houses look like in the city. We got one built, designed, it fit right in, didn't cost any more of the ugly stuff. So luckily we had that lesson when the Housing Authority got the grant for public housing. And they were so excited. They said, Mayor, we got 124 units. We know just where to put the new project. I said, we're not building more projects. They said, Mayor, we got this long waiting list. You'll be impeached. Poor people. I said, no, we're just not going to do this anymore. It ignored all the accumulated lessons of Western civilization about cities and scale and human feelings. You build these brick monoliths, crowd a bunch of poor people in there and get mad they don't work. I said, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to scatter the public housing around our city on vacant lots. So they thought that was crazy, but they couldn't do anything about that. And then we started the interesting discussion of where to put the new public housing. And, the average American doesn't wake up in the morning and turn to his spouse and say, honey, I hope we can get some of that public housing next door. So we had, had a lot of debates and controversy. We picked a site, and then we hired the architects. They came up with the renderings as ugly as sin. We got rid of those architects and got some other architects. And then this is what we built. Now this is heavily subsidized housing for really poor people. But with good design, we added to the quality of neighborhoods. We won an award from the national government, 25 years of federal design projects, bridges, devices. They gave 11 awards, 25 years, and scattered site housing in Charleston got one of them, got the award from President Reagan at the Executive Office Building, because it showed our country that you could build housing for really poor people and make it beautiful and add to the quality of the city. Then we had this one here that was one of those, and I was at a cocktail party of the home of one of the president of one of our colleges one night. Crush your people, and the service come up to give you food and drink. And so this lady with the tray leaned over, and she whispered to me, and she said, Mayor Riley, I want to thank you, because Monday I'm moving into 7 Marion Street. It was one of these. And she said, it's so beautiful. Now, this was a long time ago, in the late 70s, and I doubted if any mayor had ever had a citizen with just a few syllables to utter, thank the mayor for public housing because it was beautiful. And the fact of the matter is, in this business, there's never any excuse to build anything, allow anything to be built that doesn't add to the beauty of a city. If we allow it, it's an absolute failure. And so this one building, 2 apartments, really poor people living there became a catalyst. And so across the street, those were run down, they got restored. Around the corner, we got market rate housing. Around the corner, another corner, market rate housing. 1 building, 2 apartments, really poor people, good urban design, became a restoration. We worked to keep the bulldozers out. And these are very poor neighborhoods, so that the people who had withstood this could get them restored. We put a lot of money, a lot of federal money, and restored these, and everyone. And the reason that that's so important is that when you let these things go, memories go. And cities need memories, people need memories. We did several hundred of these, all affordable housing in one form or another. We created nonprofits and did some of our own, subsidized developers. And this here was burned out, as you see on the left. And we created a new housing nonprofit to do this one. And I took these pictures myself because I love the thought of a person of very modest resources having a 3rd floor piazza overlooking the 19th century roofscape, skyline, and steeples of our city. These were called Freedmen's Cottages. They were built by African Americans after the Civil War, I think legally owned land, 1 story of what we call Charleston single house. Neighborhood was horrible. Hurricane Hugo 89 about did them in, but we knew we had to save them. So we worked with Habitat. The first rehab job they did in America, built all new. And churches and Habitat restored the neighborhood, restored these, it's changed the neighborhood. And then we were looking for the design, what do you design for transitional housing? That's when people can move out of the shelter for the homeless. Got a great shelter for the homeless. And so this was designed by a wonderful young architect. And it won an award from the AIA. That's really poor guy, just out of the shelter, has a little bit of a space there. But good design. You know, so often when we build things in cities, somebody say, well, you know, it's just. And you can never say it's just. If people can see it, then it has to be beautiful, whatever it is. And these added greatly beautiful. Now, this was a corner lot. We all know corner lots are very important. So this was a corner lot, and the building really wasn't in that good condition. And so the building official called me and said, Mayor, we got to let the demolition permit for 17 Fishman Street. I said, no, you don't. And he said, Mayor, this thing is really dangerous, and it's leaning. And the utility pole was vertical, so it was leaning. And I said, well, we'll get a developer, put some money in it. And he said, it's going to fall on the house next door and kill the people. And I said, well, we move the people out. So we put them to Holiday Inn for 3 months in the summer. The kids had a swimming pool. Thought that was terrific. And got a developer. It was in bad shape, and restored it for affordable housing, office on the first floor. And then, now this corner has an interesting history. So then, a generation later, I'm still around, the highway department was building a beautiful new bridge coming in from Mount Pleasant, and needed to widen that piece of highway there. So they acquired it, and they wanted to take it down. I said, you're not going to take that down. So we got them to move the building back 6 feet, and then we found money, and we restored that, another life, and then in the neighborhood, we did a combination of housing authority-owned apartments and restored buildings, and then a first-time home buyer, home ownership, really poor people living in that. But that, you know, if we let that go the first time around, and the corner had been lost, none of that would have ever happened. The corners are so important. These were houses owned by the Medical University. They needed to tear them down for a parking garage. I got them to give them to us, and we put them on a vacant lot where a crosstown had come through the city 50 years ago and, you know, stubbed off streets and all that. So we moved it to that corner that was, you know, vacant, and restored them for affordable housing. And when we had the ribbon cutting on those, I noticed this. I'd been noticing this really neat tree just down from the house. So if you get in that porch closest to you and look down the street, there was this tree growing out, and it was, you know, the tree was growing out of the sidewalk and the street. You know, like it just was not going to die. And the highway department, because it was a stub street, they never saw it and didn't cut it down. So we had this tree, and I just loved that little tree. And then under the little tree was this beat-up old house that is right there. And so I told our people we need to buy that and fix it up. The tree looks so nice. A building official called me and said, Mayor, you cannot buy 15.5 Cracker Street. I said, why? He said, because it's going to fall down. And I said, let's go look at it. He said, it will kill us. And it's true. The utility meter box, I don't know if you can quite see it, was structural. They were afraid if you took it off, the house would fall down. So we got some money at it, restored it as affordable housing. And when we had the ribbon cutting on that, a lady came up to me and she said, Mayor Riley, I want to thank you. And I said, what's that for, ma'am? She said, because it used to be when people asked me where I lived, I was embarrassed to tell them, because everybody knew how ugly Cracker Street was. And she said, now I can't wait for people to ask where I live, because everybody knows how nice Cracker Street is. The big challenge of the rebuilding of the American city is the Main Street. And ours was typical. That was King Street in the 70s. And when I was a child, King Street was where everything happened. It was a shopping center for Lower South Carolina. And after I was elected, Christmas Eve, I parked behind one of those buildings, walked out of the store to King Street. And I looked up King Street. Nobody was there. It was almost gone. And we work so hard on the rebuilding of our main streets or in creating lively, diverse retail places in the hearts of new cities for this reason. And it's not the job and the tax base and doing this thing. We know it, you know it. It's because it's the public realm. And in the city, it's a place when it's lively, when it's bustling, the eye contact and elbow contact, and it enhances your sense of citizenship. You feel as if you own it. And in a city, it's so important that the things that we value the most are those that we own together. Then society is stronger. So Main Street is owned by everybody, Great Park is owned by everybody. So we did it by the numbers. We worked, saw what the buildings used to look like. We needed to get, of course, building apartments on the second and third floor. That old building, they wanted to tear it down. The guy had been a generous contributor to my campaign. I told him they couldn't tear it down. So we got some money, put apartments on the second floor, shop on the first floor, and that was Swartz building, looked like that. Put some money in it, got it fixed up, apartments about that, and then Hurricane Hugo knocks it down. Oh man, I felt so bad. But it was starting to come back, so we got a new one in there, and so King Street was coming along pretty good, but we had this real problem, and that is in the heart of our business district was this vacant lot. Now, King Street is the street, the dog legs to your left. And then the intersecting street was Market Street that had it started coming back a little bit. And it had started from a difficult image because it was once said about Market Street, it was the only place in America that for 25 cents you could get a bowl of chili, a tattoo, or communicable disease. But it had started coming back. And so what we needed to do was put enough critical mass there, and storefronts, of course, to let people move from Market Street to King Street. Because we all know human beings do not walk past a vacant lot in an urban setting. It's unnatural, and they're not going to do it. So it was controversial because people were afraid we'd ruin Charleston. What happened by then in the 70s was the national model had been sparse, not dense. People were afraid of people, and the capacity of a city to handle lots of people. And so we respected the scale, of course, of the historic buildings. We got good design, and God bless them, Al Taubman and Bob Lawson here, which built a lot of shopping malls, but they joined in with David Cordish and Bob Embry and built what we had laid out. And that's what King Street looked like on the right. And we moved the fence back a little bit so you could center the historic market building, and that's built. It's not a normal combination, a retail, hotel, conference facility, parking, I'll talk about in just a minute. But that was the exactly right critical agent, catalytic agent that Charleston needed. Now, details are so important in this business, as you know. I'll point out two details. The first on the upper left is the conference building, and then on the right you can see the parking deck. And you can notice a parking deck has liner buildings it looks like. So first, the conference space. Now, the developer wanted it to be very simple. You come down the elevator, down to the second floor, peel off into the pre-assembly space where you have a drink or a cup of coffee for the meeting. And I said, fellas, the trouble with that is then on King Street, which the whole reason we're doing all this, there will be no windows or phony windows because that's where the kitchen would be. And I said, so you got to move the pre-assembly space to King Street. And it cost them more money, but they agreed to do it. And because we all go into hotels and cities and you don't know where you are. It could be anywhere. And so that's the pre-assembly space. And you look out and you see the city. And then from the city, you see the action. You see the Civic. It's a civic connection. So they did that, and I'll talk about it in just a minute. So because of that development, probably 75 buildings were restored in what was an almost dead Main Street. And one Sunday after church, I was walking back where these gals are to pick up a Sunday Times, And I saw this fellow approaching me, and I knew him, and he was out of context. He was retired, lived in the suburbs, married, and noon on Sunday walking down the street by himself. You know, I was maybe nervous that something had happened or whatever. And so as I approached him, I said, how you doing? He's fine. I said, what are you doing down here now? And he said, Joe, and he started blushing like he got caught, you know, and was going to have to reveal an emotion, which we men, of course, never want to do. And he said, well, Joe, actually, Doris and I went to early church, and she had some stuff to do around us, and I just like to come down here and park my car and walk around because it looks so nice. And that's why we do all this, so people have that sense of pride in their city. Now, this is an office building that obviously got built, and it's, you know, maybe no great shakes, but before it was there was a abandoned gas station with a billboard above it. Now, this is right, that's the historic market building in Charleston Place, across from it, and it was an abandoned gas station with a billboard above it. And the billboard said, if you like Charleston, you will love Savannah. Now, you know, that was embarrassing as hell. So I'd do anything to get that billboard down. So the guys came to me, and they said, you know, we want to do this office building. And I said, that's great, fellas, just put some retail on the first floor. And they said, Joe, our people, you know, we were afraid you would say that our people do not want mixed use, and they won't do the deal. And I said, well, that's too bad. They needed some land from us behind. And I said, you got to do that. I said, what did William H. Hollywhite say in the 70s in Manhattan when things weren't going so well? On Upper Madison Avenue, things were going very well, because every 22 feet there was another storefront. I said, I'm trying to get people to move from Market Street to King Street, and they're not going to walk past Draperies. So they agreed to do it. Later said it was the best idea they had because it would, you know, it got a lot more money. So they had the gallery there, and then this is a nice jewelry shop. And these people were having a perfectly good time until I took their picture. They wondered what the hell I was doing. But I was watching them look at the jewelry as they were moving from Market Street to King Street was exactly what I wanted them to do. And then we get sacked Fifth Avenue to build a building at the next corner where had been a one-story savings and loan setback built in the 60s. And so a really good design and nice storefronts. And then, whoops, across the street from the nice storefronts was the old Art Deco theater, which of course had gone bankrupt. So we did a deal and got that bought and sold to a developer and fixed it up. But on the side of it was this wall, of course. Then across from that is Saks with the nice storefronts. And they were shrinking the volume of space. It wasn't going to be reused as a theater. It was a multi-purpose, you know, venue. So I said, while y'all do that, can you put some shops on the first floor? And they said, no problem, Joe. But he said, you got a really narrow sidewalk. And so what we're going to have to do is, you know, just punch some holes in the building. And you get that. And that really doesn't work. It's shady, and then trash blows in there, you know, and nobody wants to walk. So I said, walk in there. So I said, what would it take to put some storefronts, real storefronts? And they said, well, you have a narrow sidewalk, and you have to widen the sidewalk. And I said, well, that's no problem. So I, you know, called our folks and said, we need to widen the sidewalk on Market Street. And they called me out and they said, Mayor, if you widen the sidewalks, you will have to narrow the street. And I said, well, you know, I'd actually done well in math at college, and I'd actually figured that out. And I said, what you got now? They said, we got two 11-foot lanes. I actually called Andre and said, what did I get away with? He suggested 7.5 feet, but I figured that was a little tight. And so I told them, so I said, what do we have, 9-foot lanes? So they said, well, we'll study it. So they came back and a great presentation of why it obviously couldn't be done, because it showed that if a beer truck was illegally parked in one moving lane of traffic, a Greyhound bus, which no longer came downtown, but say they did, that the rear view mirrors would hit, you know. And I said, well, what if we, and I like beer, and I'll go have one when I finish talking, y'all be glad I do. But I said, what if we don't let the beer trucks illegally park? You know, for starters. And so anyway, we worked that out. And so this isn't a very good picture I took, but that extra 2 feet, you got the lamp post, you got palmetto trees, but you know, so often as we were working on American City, the first thing you say, Lord have mercy, don't make it hard for the beer trucks to park. When the question is this: how does a mother feel holding a child's hand walking down that sidewalk? You know, is it their space? Is it a nice space? And so we got the storefronts and the beer, and much more beer being sold in Charleston now. There's been no problem with that. Then we had this terrible fire on our main street, King Street, farther in a more remote, difficult area. And I was there with the firefighters, and I thought the whole 2 blocks would be gone. They contained it to just one building, and this is what it looked like the next morning when the building official called me and said, Mayor, we're going to let the building demolition permit for Bluestein. I said, no, you're not. And he said, Mayor, the mortar bonding capacity is shot, and the building cannot stand. And I said, well, we just can't take it. It was a corner building. It's a blue brick, Bluestein family, immigrated from Russia, and they built this building, and we can't demolish it. And he said, well, it's going to fall on the street and kill the people. And I said, well, let's barricade the sidewalk. So then the owner didn't think that was so hot, so we bought the facade from the owner. A good deal, probably 25 years ago now, $250,000. We bought the facade, and then he was going to rebuild the building. He called me, he said, Joe, somebody told me you want us to build a 3-story building, and we just go build a 1-story building. I said, Nicky, everybody will know how dumb I am that the city buys a big facade and a 1-story building. So he said, well, no one rent it. I said, you build it, we'll rent it. So we shored it up, built that, and that's a corner. Now, let me tell you, that part of Upper King Street is thriving, but if we had lost that building, it would have been sad anyway, but lost that corner, the good stuff. Then parking is a challenge in American City. We're doing a lot better now, but this was in the late 70s, and we need a parking garage because we do the Waterfront Park. I'll show you in just a minute. So I met with the architects, and I said, I want a parking garage that doesn't look like a parking garage. And it was so polite. They said, Mayor, you do not know about architecture. Form follows function, and the building's got to look like what it is. And I said, no, I read that, but we're not going to do that at this particular location in Charleston. And it was very historic. I mean, one of the most historic buildings in the country is 200 feet from that, you know, the Exchange Building. And so this is obviously what we end up with. But I said, I want it to look like a building with closed shutters. So the architect's so nice, but they would send me renderings of louvers halfway down, but it's like you had to see the car. You know, I mean, it wasn't any fun. So I finally got our police photographer to take pictures of buildings with closed shutters around town. That was built. The National Endowment for the Arts gave us an award for that. And Frank Hotzel, the chairman many years ago, when he came to give us the award, and we walked past it. We had a law firm on the first floor and restaurants, different things have been there. And he said, Joe, by the way, we will have a press conference, you know, later on. He said, show me where the parking garage is. And I said, well, Frank, you just walked past it. But anyway, you know, you don't have to build anything ugly, and it's really nice. And then, so back to Charleston Place now. We needed the parking deck there, and this is what you had along Meeting Street. And it looked awful, and it was junky, seedy, a lot of vacancies, and a strip joint. And but we agreed, we told the owners we would buy the whole building or the back and leave them with 50 feet. We'd have to take them eminent domain. So some of them sold the whole thing, some sold the back, and the one that sold the whole thing was the owner of the strip joint, and so they had a lease. So for a while, the city owned a building that had a strip joint in it, and so the male members of our legal department insisted that they had to inspect it every night to make sure everything was going okay. But rather than, you know, take it down and build some lucky thing, you got that. And I like this picture. I took this right after it opened. Now, this time of night, there are probably 50 people standing in line to get in one of the restaurants. But I like that because those two people are in charge. You know, it's their space. And that's what, you know, you give downtowns where people then, they own it. And then the parking is behind. It's very nice. We got fountains, and then we put gardens in our parking garages, and trees and flowering shrubs and plants. And this is my favorite, flowering peppermint peach tree. That's in the surface parking lot, because parking doesn't have to be ugly. Cities need them. And then Charleston was built on the water, and in the 18th and 19th century, city mothers and fathers had the wisdom to give the water's edge to the public. Then it was our time or chance. So this was a terrible fire, burned out, and it languished, it looked like that, burned out pylons for 25 years. And then right after I got elected, a developer bought it, and it was going to build the Venice of the Southeast. Wonderful, high-rise, gated, terrific tax space, the city desperately needed. And I told him that I really thought it needed to be a park. And he said, well, he appreciated that. He thought it really needed to be the Venice of the Southeast. And so I said, well, we will unfortunately have to acquire it by eminent domain, and which he didn't like a whole lot. And so he went after me in the newspaper, said I was a Hitler-like dictator and all of that. But of course, what we know is that belongs to the public. It has to be. That's what great cities do. And so anyway, we eventually worked it out. We did a complicated land swap and everything. And 2 years later, we had the deed signing, and had a little cocktail party after that. And he got up and told the assembled group that I reminded him of Winston Churchill. And I said, well, that's a whole lot better than what you said 2 years ago. And anyway, so we studied what the city had been. You don't plop things down in a city. It's got to be natural and organic. So great designers, and we came up with a wonderful plan, and that's what it looked like before. And of course, controversy abounded. Why do we need a new park? Where do people go to park? Parks cost money, take property off the tax books. But that's what it looked like just before we opened. And the citizens adore it. It's 26 years old. It feels like it's always been there, just a natural part of the city. We got fountains for the kids to play in. They have a ball this time of year, when the weather's warm. And then, in the design of a park, the most important design decision is to understand the purpose of the park. And every park's purpose is different, depending on where it is. What is its role for the city? What is its raison d'etre? And we knew that this was not a place for retail and not a place for vet. It was a place where the thing of beauty is joy forever, and that in a bustling city, people need places of peace and repose. And it's, I got to keep going with that. We designed that just so that would happen. The seating wall is 14 inches up. Put the bench, you put your foot over there, have lunch, kids play. Then we got this wonderful benches that we had designed for the park, and then put the bench-like devices on the, then got the pier along the water, swings under the shade structure, and then we acquired the land behind it. We needed to figure out what the right thing to do, and had a developer wanted to put a big office building. No, that's cold, it's warm, it's got something warm on the parks, need to be residential. Then we had that little fountain, you see the real fountain in a minute, and that couldn't be residential at the first level because it's like it's a campo, it's public, so you got to have something public. So we came up with the idea of an art gallery. So we got the developer to build the art gallery for us, which is really wonderful to not have to go through the stuff to appropriate the money for the art gallery. So we got the art gallery and residential. And then we started the ethic. Everybody said, you got to have access to the water's edge. So that's going to be redeveloped by the port. And then that tall building you see right there, that tall building, we needed to get in front of that tall building because we had an aquarium we were building on one end and another public use on the other end. And I didn't want you to be excited at one of those spaces and know that the other thing was just up the river and you couldn't get there. It's like you were second rate. So we finally did a deal with the tall building owners. They didn't want to do it, but finally, luckily, the bulkhead caved in. And so I said, we will fix your bulkhead, we will take over the maintenance in perpetuity, if you let us have this. So it's that one little connection is all the difference in the world. And Carol so nicely mentioned the International African American Museum. Well, that would be right adjacent to this, right on this land right next to it, right there, which was the site of Gadsden's Wharf. It's one of the most sacred places of African American history in the Western Hemisphere. And we will build this museum to honor those who were brought here and honor their contribution to our country and help us as America understand who we are, all the people that made it up. Anyway, you got the connection on the water, then the aquarium, and every place that we could. Just a scruffy old street we transformed so that you could have access on the water. And when we did that, the people were so excited. It's like their citizenship became more valuable. They didn't have to buy anything, join anything. Just every time you get people on the water. And then we needed to build a ballpark, and we built it on the water. And people said, why are you building on the water? It's very expensive, costs a lot of money, all like that. You got to offer for cheap land out on the edge of town. I said, I know all that. You build something for the public. You put it on the best land. Give them the finest land. So built the ballpark on the water. That's what it's all about. You know, it's a family-oriented, joyful, memory-building experience. You buy a hot dog behind first base at Coca-Cola or beer, and you look out. It's like a observation deck at a national park. Visioning is so important. We had a new bridge coming into the peninsula where no bridge existed before. And that was to bring a lot of people. And then the other end was the aquarium, and a preservation organization said, Joe, do you have a plan for the street, Calhoun Street? And I said, no, we should. So quickly got everybody together, the civic organizations, preservation groups, and the neighbors and the institutions, and said, yeah, it could be, Calhoun Street should be a fine urban boulevard. And there's certain uses you don't want there. You don't want motels and stuff like that. So luckily, we had the plan done. It's good friends of mine bought this. That's what property looked like on Calhoun Street. They came, he said, Joe, we're gonna do a max sleep in, and this is going to be a cash cow. These are nice guys. We went to high school with them, and I said, well, fellas, I'm sorry, but our plan says we can't have those. And I won by one vote on city council because they tried to get it rezoned. And so we kept the cheap motel out. Well, the county was looking for a place to put the library, so we bought it, gave it to the county, got the county library, which had a cheap motel. Across the street was a surface parking lot. The school board was going to leave downtown. We worked with them to build a building. City's planning department's on the top floor. So a civic building, two civic buildings, instead of a surface parking lot and a cheap motel because citizens demanded a right for their vision to be exacted on that street. This is a hotel. I got to keep moving here. This is a hotel that was bankrupt, and it was at the corner of Calhoun and King. Very important intersection. And it was bankrupt, and so the college wanted to buy it for a dorm. And so we knew, I mean, if it becomes a dorm, what happens? It reads as a billboard. It used to be a really nice place, nice location, went down, best thing they could do is work out a dorm deal. So I called the college president. I said, you know, he was a good friend. I said, y'all can't buy it for a dorm. I didn't own it. Prudential owned it in foreclosure. And I said, he said, well, I said, Joe, he said, he asked me, I said, because it has to be a hotel. And so we persevered, got a developer, fixed up. We put a lot of money, HUD 108 money, Pillar Park and all like that. But you build the right use in the right place. That became this. This here, it really looked like that, became this, one of the most popular restaurants in Charleston. And then blocks were restored, all because we got the right use there and saved that building. And then across the street was a square that never been loved, and it was, you know, they plopped a bandstand in it in the 40s. And so we got Laurie Olin and Michael Van Valkenburg to work with us because you knew it could be a wonderful urban space. And sure enough, and it cost a lot of money, they always do, and that's what we got now. It's like a public garden. It's just my term we use for it. We got fountains. In 9/11 that year, when people were starting to be afraid of public gatherings, we built 3 fountains in the city, 2 big fountains there to encourage, that cities, for people, we make them safe. We got farmers markets. And then, of course, the tax base soars around it when you do that, and we've got wonderful buildings being restored around it with Christmas tree. Then Charleston, very small peninsula. We used to have tourists come just in the springtime to see the Rainbow Row and the flowers, and then they started coming year-round, and we needed to manage that. So we had the first tourism management plan in America to study how we wanted visitors to use the city. The old railroad depot we transformed into visitor center. That's what it looked like. And it was so nice, the visitors would pose in front of the visitor center. It looked so pretty. But we wanted to get control of them and have them use the city to benefit us. Where the buses go, put vines around the building, look real pretty and smell good in the springtime. And then we put a model of the city in the floor. And I wanted that because I wanted people to see the scale of the city and know they could walk. They didn't need their car. So we got the trolleys so they know they can walk. They park their car in the parking deck, and then they get in the trolley. Now, we have saved thousands of marriages in America by doing this. Honey, I told you you're going to get killed this wrong way and everything. They ruin the vacation. No, they go and see that, and then they hold hands and they get in and then the bus goes where we want them to go and say, oh, let's stop and buy something at that stop. And so lastly, okay, so you came to this great American city and that wonderful Mayor Duggan, God bless him. What a great American story that is, and tackling this job with such energy, and he will be successful. The city will be successful. So say we all agree this. What about the citizens? What about the political support? Well, this is Burr's Liquor Store, where I go very infrequently. When I was there one time, and it's a really interesting liquor store because I knew the guys growing up, and they wore pistols. And, it's hot in Charleston, so they don't have jackets on. It's like a holster and a pistol. And somehow they got permission from the state. So I was in there one day with my modest purchase for a staff party, and these guys start converging behind the counter. Now, that's something that makes me nervous, because usually they are concerned about something or disappointed in something. So I nervously approached my good friends, and this is what they wanted to talk about. We used to have that intersection, streets, and just had that asphalt thing and those concrete buttons, and we were putting a water line down there, and a friend of mine said, why don't y'all plant some? So I gave it to my wonderful, fabulous parks people. They came up with that plan. So instead of this, we got that. One of those guys said, behind the counter, said, Mayor, you know what y'all did down there at Broad Rutledge? He said, that's the prettiest thing I ever saw. Another guy said, you know where I live, don't you? And I said, yeah. And I didn't, but he was leaning on his pistol. I said, yeah, I know where you live. And he said, I go out of my way 2 miles going home at night just to ride by that. And another one said, that was a big tree y'all transplanted. So we thought that'd be nice. Then you got a light on it. And then they wanted to get into new flower beds. And then they wanted to discuss architecture. A new building go up in the city and have blend. These guys wearing pistols, selling liquor. What do they want to talk to me about? They want to talk about beauty. So we underestimate the need and the passion for the citizenry, that they will support these kind of things every time. So if the political support was there, what is the public policy imperative? And that is shown by this. We acquired the bluestone for the sidewalks when we did the Waterfront Park. The bluestone slate was the sidewalk material in Charleston when it had money 150 years ago, and then you didn't have any new bluestone. So we got bluestone for the Waterfront Park, and they brought it in, and I went there one morning jogging, and it didn't look right. God, I'm so disappointed. It looked like something I don't know. It looked fake. And I realized what it was is that in the old days, the bluestone would be hand chiseled. And nowadays, it's got by a fine saw. And it just didn't work. So I gave the problem to our fabulous parks people, and they came up with this idea. So every piece of bluestone, the wonderful worker, you see he's on his hands and knees, tending to this tiny detail, but it makes all the difference in the world. And we require that specification on any bluestone that is laid in any public space, the city, whether the city does or anyone else. It makes all the difference. But the point is, this is a city work on its hands and knees, attending to what is admittedly a tiny detail in the city. But that's how we have to feel about our cities, because they are our civilization, and we have a duty to what we inherit, as Athenian city says, is to leave it more beautiful than we found it. So that's a public policy imperative. And the last is the moral imperative, and that is that a city should be a place where every citizen's heart can sing. So this was the Waterfront Park, the first piece we did. You can see in the distance still surcharging for the big piece of the park. But it was this little pier that had been something like this, didn't know for sure, but it had fallen in the harbor in the mud. And so we found the stones, and the designers said that's what it should look like. And I thought, sure, we needed a railing around it. We had young kids in, and they said, no, Joe, you don't need a rail around it. People not going to say, people might sit on the wooden benches, but they might sit on the granite and drape their legs over. Don't worry. I said, okay. So not long after this part of the park opened, I was jogging one morning at sunup, and I saw somebody doing exactly what they said. Sitting there, legs draped over, drinking some coffee. And I knew him. I didn't disturb him. I kept jogging. But his name was Clarence Hopkins. He suffered from epilepsy. He was very poor, rode a bicycle, lived with his mother, had part-time jobs, sweeping up in front of a gas station and shining shoes. I saw him a couple of weeks later, and I said, Clarence, I saw you down at the park. And he said, yeah. I said, you go there often? He said, yeah, Joe, I go every morning. I said, why? He said, because it's so beautiful. And I love it when the sun's coming up, and then you see those big ships coming in. You see, in the American city, we have citizens for whom that's all they've got. They've never been able to, Clarence Hopkins never been to the Great Lakes or see the sunset in the Pacific or the Purple Mountain Majesties or Amber Waves. All he had was a city. When we were opening the park, which was 2 years later when everything was done, I'd been looking for him because I wanted him to come to the opening. The only event we've ever had at the park. Symphony playing, thousands of people, blessed with a beautiful May evening. The sky was pink, the water was blue, the breeze, I remember it like it was yesterday. So I found out that Clarence had a stroke, from which he never recovered. But I found out my people where he was and brought him there in a wheelchair. His family was with him. Family thought it was odd. I'd go to all the trouble for Clarence to come. You know, he's in the wheelchair. He had a baseball cap on him, like, just a little askew, like he didn't do it himself. Somebody just put it on. And I had him on the front row. I didn't introduce him. Didn't embarrass him. It had taken us 13 years to do the park. Controversy, all those issues. And so for all the people who worked hard on the park, all my dear staff, all the designers, city officials, everybody who had worked hard on that park, I wanted Clarence to be there so we would be reminded why we did it, why we built that park, and why you do what you do. And Clarence didn't live much longer than that. But when he was healthy, in his city, coming down on his bicycle, he could begin his day in a public place and clothe himself with peace and beauty every morning. We work hard to build great places and great towns and cities for the Clarence Hopkins among us. Then we'll build great cities for everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you.